The House today passed a sweeping overhaul of financial regulations that would govern Wall Street and reconfigure the power of the agencies overseeing the nation's banking system. The vote was 223 to 202. The legislation is a priority of President Obama. It is designed to address the shortfalls that led to last year's calamitous financial meltdown. New powers would give the federal government the right to break up big, risky companies. It would also create a consumer agency to police lenders. The legislative activity now moves to the Senate. And joining us now to discuss the possible changes is Dr. Pam Drake. She's the director of JMU's Department of Finance and Business Law. Pam, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Your reaction to this passage today by the House?
Well, what we've got now is a step in the right direction. As you know, I prefer less regulation to more regulation, but what we have in our existing system is piecemeal, and that's why a lot of the problems that we had were undetected for quite a while, because you had the states regulating some firms and then different federal agencies and other regulators regulating other types of firms. And so you had a bit of confusion and nobody was talking. So by having one big overseer in terms of regulation, or at least increasing the communication among the existing regulators, we're going in the right direction to avoid the systemic risk that we had in the last problem.
So this type of regulation you're generally in favor of?
Yeah, it's not more regulation, it's different regulation than what we've had.
Okay. Now, how would this affect Wall Street and banks?
Well, it affects Wall Street and banks in a couple ways. First, there's a provision in there that would try to break up firms that were too big, because we want to avoid the too big to fail issue and the AIG type of situation where you have a very, very large firm and the failure affects all of us. So that's going to probably break up some of the bigger players. And I think that's going to be quite interesting to see if they can get such a bill passed through the Senate. It's also going to affect Wall Street because there's enhanced disclosure. So in the bill, there's a provision that hedge funds, for example, would have more disclosures. And that will actually, I think, affect Wall Street quite a bit.
All right. Now, the new powers would give the federal government, as you mentioned, the right to break up big, risky companies. This seems like a good idea, especially in light of the too big to fail thing where, you know, we were met with that last year.
Yeah, the problem is the devil's in the details. We haven't, I haven't looked at the whole bill, and they've made some exemptions so far, and I'm concerned that they'll make more exemptions. And you start making exemptions, then you really have got an ineffective plan. So I think we have to see how this works out and how the Senate treats this. If they could do a good job, or they could make so many exemptions that it's ineffective.
Now, what about this? It would also create a consumer agency to police lenders.
Well, the problem is a lot of the consumer finance companies are not tightly regulated. The depository institutions, commercial banks, they're closely regulated, but there are a lot of finance-related companies that are not closely regulated, and we need to bring those under the same umbrella to protect consumers. So I think that's a step in the right direction. It's doing what the states should have been doing, because they were regulating a lot of the consumer finance issues, and it's bringing it into one federal umbrella.
So whereas recently in Virginia they passed regulations regarding payday loan places, so this would maybe put them and the car title loans all under federal oversight?
Potentially.
And you think that's important?
I think that's important because what we have is we have kind of a two-class system in finance, and we have some folks that are have access to funds and access to loans and all that, and then we have the non-bank part of our society, and these folks rely on very expensive financing. And really, we need to bring them into the banking society, and I think we need to help them along, because right now they pay outrageous fees and interest on loans, and they really don't need to be doing that. And so we need to bring them in.
Okay, very good. Dr. Pam Drake, Director of the JMU Department of Finance and Business Law, I want to thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And now let's send it over